These are the 5 Clash Royale tips that many players follow, but in truth are completely wrong. They are exactly what's preventing you from climbing trophies. Today I'll reveal why you must avoid them and what you should do instead. Stick around until the end, because even one of these mistakes could be what's stopping your progress. The first tip is something that 99% of expert players recommend. But in reality, it's just a waste of time that won't really get you results. What I'm suggesting is something you might already be doing, but probably not in the most effective way. Every video out there tells you how essential it is to review the replays of your matches. They say it helps you spot mistakes so you want to repeat them in the next game. This can be a good suggestion, but not for every player, only for the experienced ones. The truth is, I think maybe 5% of players actually follow this advice consistently. For average players, watching a replay isn't worth it. The key step is to first learn the many different skills required in Clash Royale, and then master them by applying them in live matches. If you're already capable of using pro level strategies, and I'm talking about counting elixir, tracking the cycle, you name it, then you are already at a good level. That's when you can start reviewing replays to spot smaller mistakes you can avoid repeating. On the other hand, if you already know you're not tracking your opponent's elixir properly, you don't need a replay to tell you that. What you should be doing instead is watching top players' matches. This way, you'll better understand how to play your deck, learn proper placement, counter matchups, and see how Clash Royale fundamentals are applied to your playstyle. Plus, watching other people's gameplay will naturally make you more aware of what's happening in game. And let's be honest, it's also way more fun. This tip only makes you waste time, but the next one often makes you lose a tower in game. The method to fix it, however, isn't that difficult, and you don't need to master any complicated skills. One of the most common pieces of advice you hear is, when your opponent plays a tank from the back, you should always attack the other lane. Then there's also the idea that you shouldn't be too aggressive, and that you shouldn't spend too much elixir on defense. So your brain ends up overloaded with all these rules while you're playing, and you end up not knowing what to do. Should I play the knight? Should I wait until I have 10 elixir? Should I pressure? This often causes you to lose. Not every time your opponent pushes from the back, you have to attack the opposite lane. It depends a lot on the type of deck you're using. Most cycle decks use low cost win condition that move very fast. In this case, the best choice is usually to attack the other lane, because your opponent will have a little elixir, and therefore little time to react. These decks also usually run buildings or cards like the Fisherman, which can slow down the enemy's win condition. Other types of cycle decks are very popular, like Royal Giant and Expo. Their particular trait is that they cost more. In these cases, it's better to defend, and then attack when you can punish an opponent's mistake. For example, if they waste a key defensive card. For beatdown decks, the situation gets even more complicated. You might be in a counter matchup, so you'll want to use much less elixir on defense, or you might be in a losing matchup. You can preserve as much tower health as possible by spending more elixir on defense, or you might take the risk of attacking the other lane, knowing you have no way to defend. The answer to solving this problem is to know your deck. Study your cards and ask yourself which ones cause you the biggest problems. Knowing whether you have a high or low chance of winning is an advantage. It makes it much easier to decide what the best choice is. The next tip is about the type of deck you play. It's still debated today. Should new players go for the easy ones or for those that require a lot of skill? Depending on what you play, you might just climb trophies or actually improve your overall gameplay. It's wrong to suggest playing no skill decks. If you play easy decks, yes, it's much simpler to climb. You don't need to learn challenging placements, and the cards are pretty straightforward. But this is more of a tip I'd give to someone who just started playing Clash Royale. It's mainly useful for learning the basics and for climbing quickly to unlock new ones. But once you have a large collection, you should start playing more complex decks. That doesn't mean you have to switch every time a new harder deck comes out. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But with these easy decks, you simply don't learn all the skills pro players have, or at least not a high level. With easy decks, you can often win despite making multiple mistakes, and often a single mistake from your opponent can cost them the match. For example, your opponent plays an evolved Valkyrie on the opposite lane, and you drop Elixir Golem and Night Witch and you win the match. Instead, I suggest playing difficult cycle decks. They're definitely more challenging at the start, and they might make you lose some trophies. But what really matters is long-term improvement. You drop trophies now, but you'll become much stronger, able to apply the same principles with other decks. Playing any cycle decks with skeletons teaches all the placement. The extra advantage is that you'll have a card you've mastered perfectly and you can use it in a huge variety of decks. But the type of deck isn't as important as the spells. In this case, even a single bad placement can cost you the match. Spells are the most important cards in any deck, and it's no coincidence they're some of the most used cards in the game. I guess if we don't count this. They are crucial for removing enemy counters, but also for dealing guaranteed damage to the enemy tower. You'll often hear that you should never use for a negative elixir trade. At most, use them to remove a card of equal cost. But that's not always true. For example, there are plenty of situations where you should throw a fireball at a witch. There are also cases where using a spell on a more expensive card can be beneficial. So it's important to know when you should use your spell. First, consider the tower damage. Players often drop a fireball on a wizard. It doesn't kill him, but the tower's health still goes down. It's always worth it, because you're trading one elixir for guaranteed damage. The importance of correct spell usage increases when the opponent plays an evolution. They have very strong abilities. Playing a spell correctly is definitely important, but not as important as playing the right deck. It might surprise you, but playing a meta deck could actually be the reason you're not really improving. Everyone recommends playing meta decks. This is by far one of the worst pieces of advice you can get. Every month new evolutions and cards are added, as well as balance changes. This makes some cards stronger and others weaker. So yes, if you want to compete, you need to play the strongest decks. But only a few experienced players can afford to do that. Many still have cards that are too low level. On top of that, you have to know how to play every card perfectly. Something only professionals can do. If you change the decks every month, it's like starting from scratch each time, and you'll never become the best version of yourself. The best thing you can do is simply play one deck. Play a ton of matches, lose them even, until you've completely mastered it. If you're more confident with the cards you're using, counting elixir will be much easier, and after playing them for a long time, you'll almost certainly climb trophies, even if it's not considered meta. The meta top ladder is very different from mid ladder. When you are truly confident with your deck, you can start thinking about making changes. At first, swap out one or two cards. You should still feel comfortable. If not, you still have work to do. Later, you can switch decks entirely, but the best choice is to pick one with a similar playstyle. For example, if you played Hog Cycle, you can try Royal Hogs Cycle. But if you switch to Bridge Spam, it's like starting over from zero. Now that you know the 5 wrong tips, there's one more piece of advice almost no one talks about, but it's the key to truly improving in Clash Royale. With this method, you'll not only climb trophies, but also sharpen your skill as a player. Click here to find out where it is.